Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, we're going to talk about Bryce Canyon and other parks in southwest Utah. So Jen and I have been Rovers for over 15 years, and we've been on the board for the majority of that time in multiple positions. We both enjoy camping, cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, hiking, kayaking, and also playing pickleball. We've spent time in national parks in Arizona and Utah and have done multiple trips to different parts of the Grand Canyon. So what we're going to talk about tonight is Bryce Canyon and other parks in southwest Utah. And there's a bit of a backstory to this. We did this in October of last year, but we're also adding in Zion, which we did a number of years ago. But the backstory is that we were initially going to go into Vegas and go to the Spring Mountains to go hiking. So that was the first plan. Then there was rain. A lot of rain came through from the West Coast at the end of August, and the Spring Mountains got flooded, the trails were wrecked, and the roads were closed. So we couldn't do that, but we already had the flights into Vegas. So it's like, okay, what can we do? So then the next idea was, well, let's go and do some national parks in Utah. Well, so we were going to do that. Then there was going to be a government shutdown. So we weren't sure the parks would actually be open. So we didn't book any accommodation until we knew they're going to be open. So then finally, okay, there's not going to be a government shutdown. The parks are going to be open. Let's book accommodation. Well, we started looking at that, and there were 2 nights for some reason where it was either super expensive or there was nothing available. We're like, what's going on? And we realized or found out there's going to be a total annular eclipse during those 2 days. So we had to kind of go to different places in order to find accommodation. So we managed to have a good trip out of it, but just shows you have to sometimes be flexible. So this is the logistics, geography, geology section. I'm kind of an amateur geology nerd, but I'll try not to talk too much about it. But this is an area with very interesting geology. Here's Spring Mountains. We did go and check it out, and the roads were closed, and we got yelled at when we turned down a road we weren't supposed to go down, because by the time you didn't see the sign until you were down it, and then there was someone sitting there all day yelling at people. Okay, so those were closed. So we went into Vegas, and then you can see the 4 states here: Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona. Well, the reason there's so much cool stuff out there is the Colorado Plateau. So the Colorado Plateau was raised up over the last 70 to 20 million years, and it was lifted up about 5,000 feet. But it was also kept level, which is a little unusual. It wasn't put up at an odd angle, so it was kept level. And so then you have all sorts of things on the plateau, like the Grand Canyon National Park. You've got Zion, you've got Bryce, Glen Canyon, Capitol Reef. So there's all sorts of cool stuff in this area. And also into Colorado, which I haven't been to the things in Colorado. So that's what makes it really neat in that area. So anyway, what we did is we flew into Vegas. We got in a car. We wanted to get a smaller car because we knew we were going to do a lot of driving. Most of them were SUVs or minivans or other stuff. But the only car we could get was a BMW, which wasn't as cool as it sounded, in fact. But at least it didn't burn as much gas, I don't think. So anyway, we went up to Bryce Canyon, got there late in the day. Then we stayed there for 2 nights. Then after that, we had to bail out of the area because that's where the eclipse was, and there wasn't anywhere where we could stay. And Bryce Canyon was going to be crazy busy because people wanted to go there for the eclipse. So we went to a little town called Cedar City, which is kind of a nice little town, and we got an Airbnb. Then for the actual eclipse, we thought, well, why not just jet up freeway at 80 miles an hour or more, because that's the speed limit. And we were going to go to a state park and go to the state park for the eclipse. So that's what we did. Went back to the Airbnb afterwards. And then the next day, we went to Capitol Reef, and we decided instead of going up the freeway and taking the short way, we'd go through the mountains because it would be more scenic. So we went up this way, back through Bryce. So we went back past where we'd been, and then up through Escalante and Boulder, which was real pretty. So that's kind of what we did. And then when we were done after 2 days there, we went all the way back to Vegas. So that was 1,100 miles in like 6 days or 7 days or something like that. So it was more driving than we wanted to do, but it turned out to be a great trip. So here's a little bit of the costing for it. Our Delta flight, we got tickets for $400, which is not super bad. National Parks entrance fee was zero because I've got a senior pass, whatever I've already bought. And the car rental was pretty good, $260. Bryce Canyon Resort was probably a little overpriced at $420 for 2 nights. Then we got an Airbnb in Cedar City for $250, and it was just in a residential street, which was actually kind of nice. And then we stayed at the Chuck Wagon Lodge in Torrey up by Capitol Reef, which was really nice. And I thought it was really nice anyway, and Jen did, which we've got a couple of pictures of that. And then we spent about $200 on gas. So that was the total $2,200, which, is to some people be a lot. I mean, it could have been a lot more. So it's not that bad. So now I'm going to hand it over to Jen to talk about Bryce Canyon.
So after we got to Bryce and stayed at the Bryce Canyon Resort for one night, we got into Bryce Canyon about 9 o'clock. Oops. Here's an overview of the map. So here's the visitor center. The scenic drive is about 18 miles. We decided that we'd just drive to the end, do some hiking to get kind of warmed up because we're at a higher altitude, and then do some hikes. So we did a hike at the very end, but we also came back we came back that day and did the Queen's Garden Trail to the Navajo Loop. And the next day we did the Tower Bridge Trail. So inside the visitor center, they have these hoodoos. And you say, what's a hoodoo? These weirdly shaped rock pillars that look somewhat like totem poles are carved by water and ice in arid environments. They can be found in Bryce and other places like Zion. They're kind of a rock formation that make people take second and third looks because they're just so cool to look at. They're different colors and everything. There was a long line at where the rangers were, so there's quite a few people in here. So we just kind of looked around and were educated about hoodoos. And then we talked to the ranger about some hikes that we could do. This is an amphitheater, and you can see this from many points from the scenic view at different spots you can pull off and park and look. This is called Natural Bridge. I'm sure at some point this will fall and won't be a bridge anymore, but it was pretty fall colors as well. We got to Rainbow Point, which is just over 9,000 in elevation. There is a bristlecone loop trail that we did. It was a mile long, but it was kind of a nice warm up just to get used to the elevation. And you can just see views from miles. And then we got to this sign where it says Under the Rim. Well, there's an Under the Rim trail that is about 23 miles long. We would have loved to do it. Most people backpack it, but we just didn't have the time, and we wanted to explore the parts of the park. So we went down the Under the Rim trail for a little bit. You can see that there's been a forest fire. I'm not sure how long ago, but It is still pretty. Yeah. And I think this is a bristlecone pine. Just a baby. One of the recommendations for the ranger, and turns out to be the most popular hike that people do, is the Queen's Garden Trail. So you're starting at, I think, sunrise or sunset points. And it's a 3 mile hike. The rim right before it talks about the life of hoodoos and how it gets eroded by the water and ice and eventually gets to be just rock. There's also some horse trails that if you wanted to go on a horseback ride, it's strictly the horses. So you don't have to share with the horses. And it was pretty cool, even though the sun was out. So we were layered up and had rain jackets on for the winds. You can see the trail down here that we'll eventually be on. Just looks like a sandcastle city. Different shapes and different colors. And a couple tunnels that we had to go through, and you can see from the second one that it was a very busy trail because it is a favorite, and that's the one that rangers are really recommending. So they also recommend you go clockwise on this one, which we did. You can see all the brickwork on this switchback. So the highlight is to Queen's Garden. So this is a hoodoo, and it is named for the statue in London, England, of Queen Victoria. And if you look at the hoodoo, it does kind of have that shape at this point. And this is a golden mantled ground squirrel. Again. And then this is a chipmunk. They look very similar. It's just the stripes on the size of them and the stripes on the face and this chipmunk is, I'd say, probably at least a third of the size or half of the size of the chipmunks we see here. And then we wanted to finish up our loop on the Navajo Loop Trail on the Wall Streets. There's it's the Navajo Loop Trail, so you can go to two different ways, but the Wall Street was the one that was recommended, but that was closed, unfortunately. So we went up the Two Bridges Trail, and you can see the two bridges at two different levels there. And then we had a whole bunch of switchbacks to go up. And then there's the view from below. Now, just about a month ago, there was a rock fall that affected this trail in particular, and they had to clean it off. But so you do have to watch for falling rocks if it definitely could happen. And then this is the top of the Navajo Loop Trail. And just a view for miles. We never did see a prairie dog, but we saw the sign as we were leaving that evening. This is the Bryce Canyon resort that we stayed at. We stayed here for 2 nights. They provided a free breakfast both mornings, and it's called the resort because it has an outdoor pool, which was closed. So view from I think it's a northwest view. The next morning, we went to the northern part of the park to Mossy Cave. They recommend going really early or late-ish just because there's not a lot of parking spots. They want you to park in the parking. They don't want you to park illegally because a rock could come down and injure your car, hurt your car, or damage your car. It's a short hike to Mossy Cave, and the stream flows found here are not natural. Pioneering settlers diverted water from the Sevier River into the Water Canyon many years ago. You get to a sign where you can take a right and a left. The right leads you to a 10-foot waterfall, and the left leads you to Mossy Cave. Now, this is a picture of when obviously it's in the winter. This is what it was like in October. There was water dripping, so I'm presuming right now it's probably very icy. And then we were going to hike the Tower Bridge Trail, which is 1.5 miles each way. And then once we got down there, it's part of the Fairyland Loop. So we were going to determine if we wanted to go further or head back. And it's a pretty easy hike. It's kind of mostly downhill. You can see the trail right there. These look like chess pieces to me. We got to the intersection to the Tower Bridge Spur Trail on the right here, the Fairyland Trail to the left. And so we checked out the Tower Bridge. And also there's these medallions, if you want to call it that. If you wanted like a junior ranger program, you can do an etching on a book that the visitor center provides, and if you bring 3 out of the 9 or a selfie with these to the visitor center, you get a small prize reward. There's a wash down there, and then here's the Tower Bridge. We decided to move along to the Fairyland Trail, which is 8 miles long, so we've already done 1.5 miles of it. And this trail was a lot more up and down, but it was well marked. We did see some people on the trail, but it wasn't as popular as the Queen's Trail, Navajo Loop. From a distance, I could see this little thing that looked like a mushroom. And obviously it was not a mushroom, but it was a rock. So we got pretty close to it. You got some easy trails to follow, but they were up and down, different shapes. And we're getting to the top of the rim here. At the top, there was still quite a ways to hike to our car. So I was just kind of taking some pictures along the way. Another natural bridge turns into a frame. And there's the trail that we went down, the Tower Bridge Trail. You can see it from the rim.
So a couple of things on that I wanted to add is when we got up to the rim, we figured the rim would be pretty flat, but it was actually really up and down, which was kind of a pain. Also, you saw I was wearing my raincoat there with the hood up. I was using it like as a sun hoodie to just keep the sun off myself. And Jen actually had a sun hoodie because even though it was quite cool, the sun was pretty intense. So this is where we went for the eclipse, the Fremont Indian State Park. And this is kind of interesting because the Fremont Indians are named after the Fremont River, which is named after a white guy from Georgia whose name was Fremont. And he was actually involved in clearing the Native Americans out of Georgia. And he was also involved in 3 massacres of Native Americans in California. So it's not really a good name to name these Native Americans after. It's too bad they didn't come up with some other characteristic, but at least they got a park. The reason they got this park is when they were putting a freeway through here, they discovered that there was an old Native American village there. So then they quickly did some archaeological work there before the freeway went through. So that's why there's a park here. So in Utah, there's 46 state parks, and it would be a really cool trip to actually go to a whole bunch of these parks because some of them sound pretty interesting. Unfortunately, I didn't see anywhere where you can get a permit for out of state to go to all the parks. So you'd have to pay $10 for every park. So anyway, so here we are. We're coming there for the eclipse. The park opened at 9 a.m. and we got there right at 9 a.m. and it was already full. The parking lot was full. There was parking down the road, but it was pretty good. They were letting you park anywhere, and they were out on the street actually taking the $10 off you, so you didn't have to go into the building. They made it really easy to get you $10. You just spend your $10. So here we are. We're up a hill and looking down. There's a big crowd down there, people with telescopes and cameras and all that kind of stuff, and it's kind of interesting. Oh yeah, so it was supposed to get quite warm that day, but it was cool initially because it's kind of a dry mountain climate. So I thought, well, it's going to get warm later. I'll be fine in my shorts and sweatshirt and raincoat. But unfortunately, when there's an annular eclipse, even though it still looks sunny, the moon's in front of the sun. So the sun doesn't warm things up very quickly. So I was pretty cold for a lot of this morning. Here's some petroglyphs here on the rock. There's Jen rocking her cool eclipse glasses, and both of us with them. The thing about an annular eclipse with a regular eclipse, there is a point where you can look straight at it without eclipse glasses. With an annular eclipse, you can't at all because the sun's always around the edge. So here we are going for a hike around there while the eclipse is going on. This is actually the Fremont Creek that goes through here. That's hence the Fremont Indians. This was pretty cool. And that's what an annular eclipse looks like. If you don't know, that's not our photo. As you can see, the credit below. And but that's what one looks like. You can see here how frosty all the shrubs were that morning. So it was around freezing in the morning, and it did warm up nicely later, but it took a while. And there you can see and there was a nice trail there. And this is pretty cool. They call this the 100 Hands Cave, even though there's only 31 handprints in there. But these handprints were made by the Native Americans that used to live there about 1,000 years ago. So that was kind of cool. And there you can see them a little closer. And they also created a house like the Native Americans used to live in, a pit house. So used to live underground. That's not a Native American. That's Jen, by the way. And there's me. But it was a cool little shelter. Okay, so that was for the eclipse. Then we went back to Cedar City. And then the next day we were going to Capitol Reef. But we'd seen the sign for Cedar Breaks and didn't know what this was. We didn't know it existed before we went out there. But Cedar Breaks, it's called cedar because of the trees there, though actually they're junipers, so it shouldn't be cedars. And breaks just means like badlands, like broken up land. So we just zipped in there quickly to take a look at the place. And this is the map of it I got online. So you can see we came up 148, which by the way is now closed for the winter because it's covered in snow. We came up here and looked over the edge. There are some trails here, but this is another amphitheater like in Bryce, where it's just a big area that's just been eroded away. And this is actually, I think, a better amphitheater than Bryce. And I wish we'd have the chance to do some of the hikes here. It would have been really cool, but it was really pretty spectacular. And the elevation here is 10,000 feet. There's a nice view there. So this was a bit of snow that we had when we were out there. But up by Salt Lake, they had got a foot of snow in the mountains there. So you do need to be really careful when you go out here because no matter where you go, you're at elevation. There's just it doesn't seem there's any way to avoid it. Even Cedar City, which is on the freeway, is at like 5,800 feet. So this time of year they could get snow. We're just lucky we didn't get a lot of snow. And there's a view of the amphitheater, and that I did a panoramic picture, but it's really hard to do it justice. But I thought it was quite impressive. And then on the road to Cedar Breaks and after, there was some other nice views. So this This was a natural lake, but then they put this dam across it. So I guess now it's a reservoir. But this is just to keep the water level at a certain level. But right now the water level was above that wall. So when we first looked at it, we're like, what the heck is that lying through the lake? It looked kind of strange, but and this is a view from that road, from the mountain road down towards Zion. This was interesting. When we first drove past this, it looked like someone had gone in and plowed up the ground in this forest. I'm like, what are they doing to that forest? It looks like it's really damaging. It's like vandalism or something. But then when we took a closer look, we realized this is actually lava from thousands of years ago, and the trees have grown up there afterwards. So when you get a closer look, it's just this really broken up lava, and you can just see it goes on for miles. So as well as the plateau being uplifted, there was also a lot of volcanic activity in the area. So when we're going through these mountain roads, which were pretty steep and pretty narrow, we passed a few cyclists, and there were signs to say, watch out for cyclists. It's like, okay, we were talking about doing a bike trip earlier. It's like, I would not want to bike on here. Not only is it too steep, but I think it's kind of dangerous. So we were going over to Capitol Reef. So here's Bryce. Now this area here is the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. This national monument is 1.8 million acres. It was created by one president, and it was cut in half by another president, and then a third president came in and restored it to its original size. And you can guess which president was which, but anyway, so it's a really huge area, which would be great for hiking and backpacking, but it'd be hard to explore the whole thing. But this goes right from pretty much Bryce to Capitol Reef. Most of the land, a lot of the land in Utah is actually national federal land. But here's where the Capitol Reef is. It's 60 miles from end to end, north to south, and then 6 miles wide. You can, from Boulder, there's a road that goes in, and we drove on a little bit of it, and you can get to there's a campsite here. There's some hiking trails. But once you get to the national park, it's gravel roads. We weren't doing gravel roads in the vehicle we had. So we went down the road a little ways. And then we went up to here where the visitor center is, where there's regular roads, and it's easier driving in and out. So here's some views as we're going up there of I think this is probably Capitol Reef. You can see the pink sandstone, and you just get these beautiful open views. And this is the road, which is actually the Burr Trail Road, which goes into the bottom part of Capitol Reef. And a lot of this is desert, but where you get moisture, you get a lot of trees. And the time we were there, it was that we were getting 4 colors. So some of these areas where they actually get moisture were really pretty. And we did go a little bit into the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. So we crossed about 1 acre of the 1.8 million acres. So we didn't really do much of it, but we saw the sign. And here's a view of Capitol Reef. Here's a view of Capitol Reef, and in the background, I was really interested in what those mountains were in the back. So what's interesting about those, Capitol Reef is mainly sedimentary sandstone, but those are the Henry Mountains, and they're an igneous intrusion, so they're made of a lot harder rock. So even though at one time they were buried under all the sedimentary rock, now it's all eroded down, and they're a lot harder, so they're a lot higher. So the peak in the Henry Mountains is 11,500 feet, the highest peak, probably here, I would think. The other cool thing about the Henrys is they've released bison in there. So there's bison living wild in the Henry Mountains. I don't think they're that easy to get into, but it'd be a great place to hike and backpack. So if anyone wants to do a trip there, Henry Mountains, they look cool. So then we got into Capitol Reef, checked out the visitor center like we did before, and found out about the hikes that they had there. So this is the cool geological thing about Capitol Reef, is this is the west side, the east side. So there was the blocks of base rock way down low, there was a fault. So the west side was pushed up and the east side was relatively pushed down. So the sedimentary rocks folded over and created what's called a monocline. So after that started eroding, you ended up with all these little hills here. And that's what they call the reefs, because those are hard to cross like an ocean reef. So these are the reefs. The reason it's called Capitol is there was a lot of white sandstone domes, and so it looked like state capitol buildings. The other term that I thought was cool when I heard about it was the water pocket fold. So where these folds are, because you've got all these pockets in here, you'd actually find water would collect in some of those folds. So you've got the water pocket fold. So it's very interesting geology here. So this is a map that they gave us in the visitor center of the different hiking trails. So we decided to do a few of these hikes. So when we first got there, we did the Chimney Rock Trail. Then we checked out the Goosenecks. And then the next day, we came back and we did this long 11-mile, 1,600 feet elevation hike, or combo of 3 hikes. And then we also did the scenic drive. So, we got a good look at the place, but there's obviously a lot more we could have done if we had more time. So this is the Chimney Rock Loop. And you can see these bright reds and pinks and really nice views. And it doesn't take long to get up high and get some nice views. There I'm advertising for Siemens, so maybe they'll give me some money. View down on the road. And this is where we parked. I think this is the Beamer down there that we drove. Everyone else is pretty much driving SUVs. But we didn't want to, though it would have been nice on some of the back roads. Oh, yeah, this is Chimney Rock, and I was standing in front of Chimney Rock before. That's what the hike is named after. So this is the goosenecks. The goosenecks are basically where there's these meanders that are eroded way down into the rock. And they're not sure how it was created, whether there was a river meandering on the top here, and as it was lifted up, it cut down, which is what they think the Grand Canyon did, or whether the river here cut into faults that were in the rock. They're not really sure. So that's something geologists can argue about. So we went to Torrey, into Torrey, which is a nice little town to stay overnight. And then we came back next day and we did the three trails here, the Hickman Bridge, Rim Overlook, and then Navajo Knobs. So this is the trail here. I think it's this part of it where there was a sign that said, warning, possible rock falls, don't stop on the trail. So I suppose statistically, if you don't stop on the trail, the faster you go, the less likely you'll end up with a rock on your head. And if you lollygag and stand around, you're more likely to get one. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Yeah, the rock formations are pretty interesting. This is Pactol's Pyramid. And as you go up, you see that from different directions, and it's a good landmark. So we're on our way to the Hickman Bridge. So if you see here, this is the Hickman Bridge. It's a natural bridge. You can't see it so well here, but you'll see it better in a minute when you get the little blue sky under it. So this is the bridge. And there was a couple there we got chatting to that were nice enough to take our photo. And there's another photo of it. So it's kind of cool. Go see it while you can. Eventually it's going to erode more and fall down, but might take a few hundred years. And here's some of the views down and the nice color of the trees down there. And here's one of these water pockets. So, and here's the bridge again. Now you don't see the blue sky. It's harder to see. This is as we're going up to the Overlook Trail. And a lot of places here, we're following the layers. So you get these big expanses of just flat rock as you're going up. But all these rocks are tilted up at like 10 degrees. So we're going around and following the edge there, and then hiking up the 10 degrees. Here's the pyramid again. And this is kind of interesting. So this is called Fern's Nipple and was named by the outlaw Butch Cassidy. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and their gang used to hang out in this area, and they had a hideaway, I don't know, 60 miles or 100 miles from here that they used to go to after they robbed some banks or trains or whatever they were doing. So here's some of the views from the overlook. So this is the campsite, I think. Yeah, this is the campsite. There's a little trail up here, and we'll go down to that later. And you can see all the trees down there. There's actually orchards here. There's a place here called Fruta, which is because of the orchards they planted back in the day. This is the visitor center. This is a view across to the visitor center, which is right here. And there's kind of a bit of zoom in. Here's the visitor center. And now we've gone to the rim overlook, and we're going to go up to the Navajo Knobs that are 2.2 miles away. And we didn't realize it as we're going up there, but we're actually going, this is the Navajo Knobs right there, if you can see my cursor. Even though it doesn't look as high as these, it's further up, and that's kind of a high point where you get a 360-degree view. And I took a lot of photos of that. There it is again. Okay, I'm not really pushing that rock over the edge. Even if I could, that would not be a good thing to do, because there might be someone below. But it's amazing, these huge, heavy rocks that you see. And there's Navajo Knobs again. The way these rocks are rounded are kind of interesting. Yeah, I got way too many photos. So in a lot of places, like I said, you're just on flat rocks, so there's no trail you're following. So thankfully, there's a lot of cans up there. If you can spot the can, we got a little lost, I think, in some places. Again, we're getting into the Knobs area. And you can see there's some people up there. When we got closer, someone had beaten us to it. So when we got up there, some people had already got on the top of the rocks. And so we didn't go up there. And they offered to let us up there or to move out right when we were ready to leave. But we got into the shade, which was kind of nice anyway. Nice to get a little bit of shade. So I don't know what these are. So if anyone has an idea, let me know, because it looks to me like it's some kind of life form that was in the seas when this sand was deposited. I don't know, maybe it's a jellyfish, maybe it's some kind of clown. I don't know. And I tried to look for it, I couldn't find it, but looks like something interesting. And here we are on the way back down. Some of the views on the way back down. Again, you can see all these rocks tilted up. That looks like a shark fin there. And there we're coming down this last little bit of the trail. And this is the same Fremont Creek that was at the state park. Goes through Capitol Reef also. There's a marmot crossing. Unfortunately, we didn't see a marmot or a baby marmot, but we did see the sign. Oh, and then we did the scenic drive, and then we were coming back through the campsite, and there was an elk here helping itself to some of the fruit in the orchard. So that's kind of cool to see. And everyone in the campsite, I don't know whether they saw it or whether they just see him all the time, but they were ignoring it. We were excited to see it. Oh, this is our place in Torrey. We had this little room, which wasn't too special, but it was nice. It had this little alcove, so I could sit there with my computer, and you could look out over the roofs. And this is what it looked like from the outside. I just kind of like this little place, this little town. And our room was actually over the general store, which was kind of nice. We had to get steps. We had to walk up the stairs, which is fine for us. There was no elevator. But we could go down to the general store and we could get snacks, or we could get free tea whenever we wanted, which was a big deal. And there was also a breakfast place in the back of here where we had to pay for that, but where we could get a breakfast. So this was a chuck wagon. I recommend it. It was, I thought it was pretty nice. Nice little town too. This is the weird general store trading post that was across the street, but it was a nice little town. Now I'll hand it over to Jen again.
Mm-hmm. So back in July of 2011, we went to Zion. It was July. It was not the best time to go, but that's when we had to go. So this is kind of a big overview of the park. It's pretty big. And we did a couple hikes. We went up to the Weeping Rock. Next day, we went on the West Rim Trail towards Angel's Landing. So these are the shuttle buses in 2011. They're propane fueled vehicles, which was pretty cool. But with a grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation and other funds back in 2021, Zion was able to fund the replacement of its entire fleet to be new battery electric buses. So, and I read that they're going to try and do this in all the national parks. So, Zion is really wanting people to just bus in, park outside the park and bus in. And so there's less congestion in the park. So we took the bus to Weeping Rock. It is there's water coming down on the walls, but it's also dripping on us a little bit. And then this is the view from the Weeping Wall. The next day, we took off early to get to Angel's Landing. Right now, back then, we didn't need a permit. Right now, everyone who hikes from Scouts Lookout to Angel's Landing needs a permit. So the trail starts out at a good incline, but it was pretty easy. Found a lizard along the way. And you get up pretty high pretty quickly, and then you run into Walter's Wiggles, which is well known. And you can see how high we are at that point. We got to Scouts Lookout and was going to attempt Angel's Landing, but it was July. It was super hot. Our hands were sweaty. The chains were very gritty and didn't feel very safe to me. So I turned back, and then shortly after, Barry turned back too. So we did not get to Angel's Landing. We decided to hike further up to the rim and just do a view from the top. So we got someone to take our picture, and we started up. So here's a side view of Angel's Landing. And we hiked through some in a forest, but this is probably the most shade we had all day. We were trying to cool off by some water that was on the rock walls, which was very handy. Deer. We didn't plan on doing this long of a hike, so we didn't have a ton of water either. We got up to this point, and there was a squirrel just yelling at us. They did not like us there. It was just kind of cool once we got to the top, seeing stuff from above. So some cactus with flowers. And then on the way down, I had run out of water completely, and we got to the top of Walter's Wiggles, saw another cactus. And then we actually did fill up our water bottles a bunch and drank a ton of water, and then we put our feet in the river. And we got back. We wanted to check out the tunnel that's on the east side of the park. It had been closed the day before, so we weren't able to see it, but it was open now. So we just kind of drove over there. I think we drove most of the way through the tunnel before turning around. And that is it. So if there are any questions, you can speak now or type something in the chat. Is there anything in there yet for questions, or you answered the car rentals thing?
Jen, what was the name of the town that chuck wagon place was in?
Torrey, Torrey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a nice place. I mean, the views from those places are so great. You got mountains all around you.
And it was like 4 miles or 7 miles out of the park.
Right.
It wasn't
It was
too
close.
far.
And there were restaurants there. We
Mhm.
went to a restaurant there, so you didn't feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. Chuckwagon is now, I just looked it up online. It's closed for the winter. It's open again in March, so they might have a bunch of snow too. I don't know what the elevation is there, but I'm sure it's high like everywhere else.
So did you guys stay, or did I miss it? Where did you stay when you went to Zion?
Oh, good point.
Oh, we stayed at a motel outside of Zion. We didn't stay in the lodge. I don't remember what it was, but it was in the town really nearby.
Springdale or Springville? I can't remember. Spring something.
Yeah, we can take a look at it and we'll get back to you.
I think it's really the only accessible town and yeah, close to Zion
Yeah,
or that gate.
yeah. Casey?
Yeah, thank you. This is a really great presentation. I really enjoyed it. So my family and I were planning a trip there for spring break. So first week of March,
Ooh.
going to Zion, Bryce Canyon, and Capitol Reef. Still trying to figure out whether or not Cedar breaks because, as Barry pointed out, the accessibility in the winter is pretty minimal to what you can see. But one of the things two things I wanted to point out, I put in the chat, there's supposedly a world-class restaurant in Boulder called Hell's Backbone Grill. And the two women who started it fought hard to preserve the Grand Staircase Escalante. And so they really helped to keep it in the forefront so that when the administrations changed, it was restored to the way it was originally. But if people are in the area, they might want to check that out. And then I just want to echo that Fremont Indian State Park is just amazing. So I've been out there and it's just loaded with petroglyphs. And what's so fun is they give you a map as to where the different petroglyph panels are, but they said we know there are dozens, if not hundreds more that we haven't mapped or even discovered. So if you just wander the trails and find some, come back and let us know so we can add it to the map. And it's just so fun, so fun. And you asked about permits, at least back then, this is years ago, but they had a ridiculously cheap, like 7 or 10 day permit for all Utah state parks. And so I don't know if it's still the same policy, but it was something like $15 or $20. And some of these Utah state parks are, comparable to the national parks. And so that'd be really good. And I'll echo your Highway 12 is one of the most beautiful highways in the country. And so what a great job. We're really, can you tell I'm really excited about the trip that's coming up? So,
I hope it works out for you.
yeah, me too. So we were really excited to see this presentation, was coming up. And so this is helpful. So, actually, one question. That Weeping Wall area, the hike looks so cool, but it's been closed due to a landslide. And I think
Yes.
it's made for quite a while. I'm not sure, but I'm trying to get a hint, a hunch as to whether or not it'll reopen by March.
Yeah, I just saw today that it was closed. I didn't do any research as far as how long it's been closed or anything.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully it'll reopen. Anyways, thanks so much it was a great job.
Yeah, that's the thing is these areas are so beautiful because they are, heavily eroding. So when we were going to Zion, we couldn't come in the entrance we wanted to go into because a big rock the size of a vehicle had rolled down the hill and blocked the road. And I went to Arches years ago, and then one of the big arches that was there that was cool to see is, collapsed. I mean, that's kind of what happens. So I was going to say to Carol, I think you mentioned Springdale. That is where we stayed in Springdale. We stayed at the Driftwood Lodge. So,
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention I went to. Can you guys hear me? I was in Zion in the spring of 2022, and the park was full there was no parking available by 8 a.m. You have to park it in Springdale somewhere, and then you have to take a shuttle. Well, first of all, you have to pay for parking, then take a shuttle into the park. So that was a little inconvenient. That's going through Springdale. I think when I checked, staying in Springdale was much more expensive. If you're 15 or 20 miles out, I think I stayed in a town called Hurricane. It was maybe almost half the price that it would be if you're staying in Springdale. So if you have a vehicle, it might be worth it to stay a little farther out and then drive to Zion. But I recommend, if you're going to Zion, get there early. I don't know. I was there by 8 o'clock and the park was full. There was no parking.
Yeah, we were there early too because we knew we wanted to do some hiking, and it was July and we didn't want to be hiking in midday.
I was amazed how busy Bryce was because we weren't there, and I don't think we were there in the high season. I'm not sure what the high season is, but it was pretty busy. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but it was definitely busy.
I quick question. Has anyone here hiked the Narrows?
We didn't when we were there.
We had some rovers do it. Oh gosh, it was probably around 2015 or something. So I mean, I could get you some information if I could send them your email address if they wanted to talk to you.
This is Judy. I just did it in September, the Narrows.
Yeah, I've done it as well.
And I loved it. You had to be in total concentration and total balance. And it was better to have their big wooden pole than hiking poles, but I saw people doing it with both. I love.
So a trekking pole is just a little too light, you're saying?
Well, the thing is that you got rocks underneath you, hidden by water. And your trekking poles, if you don't have a basket on the end, that little metal thing, that's not going to latch onto much of anything. But if you use their 1-inch thick wooden pole that they give you when you rent their shoes, I highly suggest renting their shoes and their pole at the Outfitters, which are right at the entrance. So
right. They have boots that you can rent, and they're kind of like hard boots, similar to like ski boots, kind of.
They're rubberized on the bottom, but they still gave me really good feeling in my feet. And I was a dancer for a long while, so I've got good balance, and I loved that I could feel my feet, but you can put the pole ahead of you and say, is there a rock there or not?
Wow. This is really good advice.
I fell twice, but only both times on the way back when I was more tired. And the first time I just broke out laughing because I fell backwards onto my butt. And I was like, well, that's the right way to fall. The second time I fell directly onto my kneecaps under a rock, which scraped me up a little bit, but not seriously.
So we'd be there when it's cold. And so, I think we'd have to rent these dry suits. Do you happen to know, do they do the dry suit rental there at the trailhead, or you have to do it?
They got different packages for different seasons. And when I was there in September, and it was just this last September, they said, nope, we're not renting any, waders to you. It's only the shoes and the pole and something else that I said no to. So it depends on the season and how cold the water was. It was 55-degree water, but it didn't feel nearly that cold because you were concentrating so much. You didn't care.
And that was right at the end of the River Walk Trail at the beginning of the Narrows, you're saying? That rental place?
There is an entry into Zion. If you're not walking in, it's an entry at the I can't call it the north end, at the upper end of Springdale. And it's a
Oh,
walk-in entrance, and the rental place is right before you get to the walk-in entrance. So it's super
gotcha.
easy to find.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're
That, that, no, that,
welcome. I loved it. I loved it. I was like, I don't know if I should do this. I didn't know if I should do this. And it was the best hike of my life.
Really?
then the shuttle will take you right to the beginning of the Narrows, so you
Yes,
don't
but
have.
the shuttles can be confusing because there's the town shuttle that only goes
Right.
up and down the town, but then there's the park shuttle that goes up and down into the park. So
Yeah.
you got to figure out the difference between those two shuttles.
Yeah. Last I checked, they're not. They don't. They say those start up sometime in March, and so I'm hoping that we might be able, that they haven't started yet, and that we could drive in, get a real early start, drive in, and park near the beginning of the Narrows.
Oh, the water will be gosh awful cold in March and April.
Well, that's why I said we would need those dry suits.
Yeah, because I did it in shorts and their boots, and
Yeah.
but I had a couple layers on top, and you want
Yeah.
everything in a dry bag. I had a dry bag inside of a backpack.
Okay.
And especially your phone has got to be in a special, dry case.
This is very good advice. Thank you
You
very
will
much.
get wet, but you'll love it. I'll have to do a sequel to this presentation, just on the Narrows and other stuff I did that they didn't.
We'll slot you in, Judy.
Yeah, you betcha.
We will.
It was with the Florida Ski and Travel Club, so that's another presentation in itself.
So Barry, Jen, did you have any last words to say?
No, just thanks for attending. I hope it was interesting, and it sounded like it spurred some conversation. So
Yeah, Utah's
good.
a great spot. I mean, so many different hiking areas.
Yeah, and we were there in April. We paddled down the Green River down to the Colorado in April. So we were there twice this year, just coincidentally. But yeah, it's an amazing state, really.
So, can I add one more thing from my friends who live outside of Zion?
Sure, go ahead, Carol.
Okay. They live in Huracan, and I don't know why they call it Huracan instead of hurricane. Anyway, lots of construction. So I don't know how cheap it is to stay there anymore, but they also say that since the pandemic, the park is just wacko, year round, but particularly when the kids are out of school. So if you can plan it, while kids are in school, that's probably a better bet because those shuttles get really crowded, and yeah, during the best season to go, yeah, there's mobs of people. So it's a great trip though.
All right. Well, thank you, Carol. And Jen and Barry, thank you too.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.